Kurt Angle had one of the greatest runs in WWE history, coming into the world of wrestling with a simple credential, that being the gold medal in Atlanta. Angle quickly transitioned and became one of the standouts in the Dory Funk wrestling camp. He debuts and within months becomes a notable character in one of wrestling's most successful eras. Angle is a natural and understood the essence of what being a professional wrestler was all about. I think with the WWE style, Angle became a master of it. There's not many in that era on the roster that could do the style as well as him. Angle became one of the most decorated professional wrestlers ever, having multiple WWE championships, a main event at WrestleMania, and multiple Match of the Year candidates with matches against the likes of Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, why the hell did I write Kurt Angle, and The Undertaker. Brock Lesnar was perhaps his greatest rival, and in terms of match, Shawn Michaels was probably his greatest opponent. But getting to the top obviously took a lot out of Angle, but just staying around was much more difficult. He became addicted to pills and found himself becoming a drug addict before his very eyes, to the point where WWE let him go because he refused rehab, and Angle saw this as a sign to change. Not his habit, but his place. WWE thought he was going away for a break, but then he gave TNA their greatest acquisition ever. The debut of Angle was incredible and served as a message to the world of wrestling that TNA was growing. It was a terrible decision for Angle on a personal level, but professionally, he was still one of the world's best, if not the very best. Because when you look at 2006, who could you straight up say was better than Kurt Angle? Kenta, Bryan Danielson, Edge had a great year. In terms of wrestling, he was probably the best around. Plus for me, I always liked the weird Kurt Angle character, and when he became the no-nonsense wrestling machine that seemed to disappear. Here in TNA, he was running around with a Speedo, threatening to beat up Sting's kid, and on top of that, I don't know if it was the water in Florida or the fact that he saw the competition show more athleticism, but Angle went insane in ring. You know this guy was on something when he'd come out in the white shoes, he'd hit those crazy-ass moonsaults, 450s, and he pushed himself to the limit. Angle faced numerous talent in TNA, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Mr. Anderson, Desmond Wolfe, who was of course Nigel McGuinness, and all these matches were some of his best in his career. The Joe match in 2006 was unique and brought an exciting style of match. A type of match that doesn't need 20 minutes to materialize. Anderson inside the cage is one of the best matches in TNA, one of the best matches of 2010, and certainly an unexpected classic. Even without the moonsault, I watched it years ago and was very impressed. The Wolf matches make me ponder on an American Dragon battle, but Angle came out of TNA broken and battered. He was so run down that his personal problems started to override his professional, but at least he got a hold of them right before his departure. Now that Angle was away from TNA, the obvious question came up. When was he gonna join what culture's wrestling promotion? Now before Angle's big return to the promotion, he made a name for himself in the world of wrestling, which is of course the WWE. Angle embarked on an indie run. If you don't want to watch this, you can skip over to this moment. But let's talk about it. Angle had a list of opponents he wanted to face, list of bookings. Most of them were in the UK because he didn't know if he was going to return there as a performer. But this was certainly a strange run. He first met Rey Mysterio on March 20th, 2016. 2 out of 3 falls match on your fight. Rey had just left WWE and was doing some crazy stuff you didn't know he was still capable of, and I hope to dive into in the future. I'm kind of looking at AAA and how they deal with copyright and stuff like that, but it's a run you should watch. This event as a whole was weird. Jim Ross and Quinton Rampage Jackson were on commentary. The card featured shoot fights and involved the likes of Chael Sonnen and Michael Bisping, Justin Roberts as an announcer. I'm thinking to myself, is this how AEW would have been in 2016? These two were older here and neither were going to have the youth spring to them. With Rey, he got better and better during his time away, but not so much for Kurt Angle. This match was good. Angle overwhelmed him like crazy in the first fall. Rey quickly bounces back to even the fall, and funny enough, even with their ages, they still got the fans into this battle. I guess wisdom is never lost, but they also understood not to go too long and throw everything they could in this one. As expected, Rey was the one who impressed me more here. Angle became the heel here with a big low blow and the ref was down, and this thing was so messy with Rampage's commentary, riff-raff interfering. It sounds like a bad dream. Like, what the hell is this? This sounds like a fake event. It doesn't sound real. And Rampage was talking like Rey won this match for himself and said riff-raff needs to ice Rey's balls after the low blow, which was hilarious. I don't sell the match perfectly, but it was insanely weird. Angle followed with a match that would leave you thinking, wait, that happened? And it was a battle against the prodigy, Zack Sabre Jr. The Wizard himself meets the Olympic gold medalist. Revolution Pro was the home to this battle in London. Angle came out to his WWE theme song and the crowd almost fell to their knees. Now this is one of those battles that needs to happen in their primes, but it's good that it happened. The reason why I called Sabre Jr. a prodigy is because he's been highly lauded since the beginning of his career. Technically sound wrestler going up against one of the most famous technical wrestlers and the most famous of the 2000s. Now this one wasn't bad, but it was definitely short and seemed to focus less on the technical aspect. Sabre still showed that off, and in the story proved to be his greatest weapon. Even then, Angle's experience came into play, and that was enough for the victory. Fun match, fun match just for the idea of Zack Sabre Jr. against Kurt Angle, because when you think of those two, you think of two different eras colliding, so it's a bit odd that it went down. Next up was Cody Rhodes. Cody and Angle is a bit of a weird one to imagine, not so much as Sabre Jr. and Angle, but Rhodes had a lot of free time after leaving WWE, and he was going to make the most out of it. This was one of his big goals after leaving the company, and I think Rhodes would probably attest to Angle teaching him a lot during these series of matches. This one was a basic house show style match, but it's funny how from out of nowhere, Angle and his opponent just go into 6th gear, so he can't build to it anymore. Angle wasn't doing too well, but the fans were always happy to see him. I know I would. Of all the opponents he faced next, it was one of the most random. Joe Hendry. Hendry was a new name in wrestling and mostly doing decent in England. He was a character guy, and that helped put him on the map. He did a funny parody of Born in the USA based on Kurt Angle, and the story of this match going down is a funny one because Hendry idolized Kurt Angle, he looked up to him, and he wanted this match, but Angle was like, "You're not ready yet. I seen something yourself. We gotta wait it out." After he left Impact though, it was open. Now Hendry was more of a rookie here. He was around for only 3 years and already got himself a match against Angle in a time where Angle was nearing the end of his career. You'd expect somebody like Ricochet, Johnny Mundo, even Will Ospreay at the time to get this kind of match, not Joe Hendry, but he got it. This was the best worked match in Angle's indie run up to this point, which is funny saying because Hendry was a rookie. Hendry was a rookie but showed plenty of upside here. He was presented as the face that was forcing himself to get on the level of Kurt Angle. Angle himself was still going crazy here, and it was the best possible match that these two could put on in that time. Angle won the match but still put over Joe Hendry as the star of the future. From here, he went back to Cody Rhodes. Angle had a rematch with Rhodes, which was better this time around. The atmosphere alone tops the last match, but here they actually told a story with Angle's ankle lock being a huge centerpiece of the battle. Rhodes felt something in the ankle early on, so you know what naturally follows. Rhodes pulled a lot of weight here, which helps the match tremendously, and this also proved that Angle could have a good match, but it required his opponent to go all out and bring out their very best. This would have been incredible had Rhodes been in TNA a year earlier. I know he was considered the 3-star general, but he had some nice matches. Angle once again got Rhodes with the same hold that got him the win the last time around. A trip to ICW fought against one of their biggest stars, Joe Coffey. Again, these names against Angle feel like the two talent are generations apart. And you would think it would be Drew Galloway facing him here, but that ended up happening in WWE. Solid match here. I don't really have much to say about it other than the fact that Coffey's paint stuck on Angle. He lost, but it was off to a pretty random match. Not so random in that time, but in hindsight, it was. Angle faced Alberto El Patron. Alberto had just left WWE and was one of the most wanted people on the indies. Like, I'm not exaggerating. This guy had a lot of talk about him once he left WWE. Again, this was Angle's final match in the UK, which wasn't so true, but in that time, it certainly was. Man, I was glazing this match like crazy, and I don't even remember glazing it like that. But this was Angle's best match. It was psychologically sound and the most story-driven match on the retirement tour. Del Rio made use of his younger age and brought intensity and an incredibly precise game plan. The other matches were Angle doing a couple of things before going into overdrive. Here, they went through the whole process. Angle was brutalized, his arm was useless at some points, Del Rio was a madman and a hothead, and it was one of the best What Culture matches. The post-match was also used to put over Joe Hendry. But yeah, What Culture had something cool going on here. I don't know where they brought the money from. I don't know, maybe Tony Khan was a secret investor or something, but these guys had some money to bring in some pretty notable talent. You know, they weren't bringing in randoms. They brought some of the major names of the indie circuit, like you'd see Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle, Jay Lethal, Cody Rhodes. These names aren't jokes on the indie circuit. Angle had one last match and it was against Cody. Cody was now a member of Bullet Club right as the elite version of it was turning up. These two put on a show here, and Angle, knowing this was his last match, decided to bring out a lot more. He was broken but still put on a good show here for the fans. Rhodes out here risking life to emulate Angle. He took notes of his first match with Angle and decided to loosen his boot to score the win. Rhodes cut a great promo about Angle and his value to his own career and offered him a spot in Bullet Club. Good match. Overall, Angle's last tour brought some unique opponents. The matches are interesting to watch just on the basis of who he's facing. Zack Sabre Jr., Cody Rhodes, Alberto El Patron. You can see him try his best to bring out something, but ultimately, it's just not the Angle everyone is familiar with. Even then, I kind of wish he would have had an ROH run here so he could face like Jay Lethal, Adam Cole, some New Japan guys like Katsuyori Shibata, although both of them probably would have died if they faced each other. I wish that would have happened, but it is what it is. Ultimately, he's only able to in sub 15-minute matches. This is where a storytelling element shines. He bases the match on something simple like Rhodes' ankle, him not being able to out-wrestle Sabre Jr., so the matches do offer something. It's just not the Angle everyone is familiar with. Now, Angle had a lot of unfinished business in WWE. He left a lasting legacy in the company, and since his time away, I felt like WWE didn't care about presenting him as one of their very best wrestlers ever. And he was. He's Kurt Angle. You rarely saw Kurt Angle in archival footage, and he was a non-factor in the history of the WWE, it seemed. We heard plenty of rumors that Angle was interested in returning, with the closest being 2014. His TNA contract was set to expire, and he held talks with WWE. Triple H said they weren't hiring older guys now, which is ironic, because he seems to spam the return button every single moment, but that's for another video. I think Angle could have been the perfect opponent for Rusev during that time, and he actually had more in his tank back then. A prime example of that is this match with Lashley in 2015. Incredible match. It's the last truly great Kurt Angle match. 2015 rounds against Angle would have been memorable. US title, open Cena, and I watched Angle's final matches from TNA for this video, and he had something there initially. It never materialized, but Angle was hopeful that it would eventually happen. As time went on, WWE apparently contacted him for the brand split, and Angle in June of 2016 said it's a matter of when, not if he'll return to WWE. I remember believing there was a chance he'd return on the first brand split episode of Raw, seeing as they were in Pittsburgh. It never happened. A few months passed, and I remember this very well. I was so happy to hear that Angle was returning. After all, WWE was his home. He made a name in the world of wrestling here. Two of the greatest WrestleMania matches involved him, and he was being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. The Angle return was big news at the time. It also meant WWE would magically decide to call him an all-timer, which he is. But on the surface, Angle's return opened the door to many matches and possibilities. He was about to enter a roster full of hungry talent ready to steal the show, and some old foes. Angle was inducted into the 2017 WWE Hall of Fame, and I wouldn't say it's overdue, but it came at the perfect time, seeing as Angle was closing his career. They did a funny segment where Teddy Long thought he was the guy that was becoming GM, but it turns out to be the Olympic hero himself, Kurt Angle. Angle being general manager makes a lot of sense, seeing as he was previously SmackDown's, and they developed a story out of it. While Angle wasn't as electric as a character, his first backstage segment still brought out something logical from his character. You know, SAWFT soft, and he's like, that doesn't spell soft. He was making matches and doing the GM thing, but it didn't take long for a storyline to begin, and this story is so out of the left field even for that era of WWE. It was a meme during this run. Corey Graves got some mysterious information for Angle which could potentially ruin his career. They were presenting this as something that would ruin everything, and it all turned out to be a son. Corey Graves kind of fit this role as somebody who knows more than others. It felt like an extension of his older character, and if it was the Ruthless Aggression era, I know for a fact they would have went over the top with this character. As for Angle, well, the storyline was odd. I don't know why they thought of it, but perhaps it was going to be used to push this young athletic wrestler who competed in the Olympics, right? Well, the reveal happened and it turned out to be Jason Jordan. Why Jason Jordan? I don't know, but Chad Gable was the perfect candidate, just on the basis of him being an Olympian. Jason Jordan was a good talent. At the time, he was Gable's partner, and it feels so long ago, but those two were known for being a tag team. So you couldn't imagine in that time for Jordan to be a single star. This thing was hilarious. So Gable at the time was actually considered for it. It made too much sense, so they just turned around and made his partner the guy. I mean, if he said Jordan was his son and you didn't know anything about Kurt Angle, you would believe it. But Jason Jordan was closely observed by the higher-ups. They saw more in him than Chad Gable. Translation, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You guys know how it is. The bigger guy, they think he has a look, he has a lot of athleticism, they're gonna choose him over Chad Gable, obviously. The fans weren't really receptive towards Jordan in his first promo. They booed him, and this story would continue to develop with Jason Jordan essentially forgetting that he's his own person and always associating with his biological father. The Miz disrespected Angle and has always questioned his leadership skills before adding that Jason Jordan, Angle's son, was getting stupid opportunities when somebody like Bo Dallas deserves these chances. He called him a deadbeat. No wonder some of his best matches were with Ray. They share a lot of similarities. Jason Jordan got himself an Intercontinental Championship match after proving himself, aka his father allowed for him to prove himself. He came up short in the title match, and Angle himself ended up in his first WWE match in 11 years. And the scenario that brought this was strange. The Shield without Roman Reigns facing Kane, The Miz, Braun Strowman, and The Bar. It was so odd because you imagine Angle's return in some event where he could actually wear his own attire. But the match was chaotic in a good way. Angle is limited here seeing as he hadn't competed in months, but also because he can't go like he used to. He did make his mark in storyline by dealing with The Miz though. Great match, I loved it. It's a bit divisive, but I thought it was wonderful. But Angle's first real match was probably set up to be Survivor Series. Brand supremacy again. Shane and Angle had a competitive relationship in the past, and that of course was brought to the brands. Under Siege, that's how they promoted Survivor Series. All of a sudden, everyone has pride for their brand. Jason Jordan was originally in the match, but after his injury, Angle wanted to replace him. The fans were booing Jordan. They didn't like him because he was like a baby. He was also trying to get him to make decisions that benefit him, and his promo here was so generic. There was this one point where he grabbed the microphone and he's like, "This is the one time Raw and SmackDown go head to head." Why does he have to say that? It makes him look like a bot. Stephanie looked more like a face here, demanding Angle make the decision, and the fans cheered her like crazy once she came out and interrupted that promo. And then a furious Triple H stormed down to the ring, and I believe this was the first time Triple H showed up since WrestleMania 33. The fans were certainly excited to see him. He did something great for once and buried Jason Jordan. This guy's constantly calling for dad, and I dislike how WWE made Kurt Angle look so weak and soft. And that obviously starts with the story, but when you see Triple H and Angle stand face to face, it brings some energy, but not as much energy as you'd hope. Triple H stole Jordan's spot because this was no joke. This is Survivor Series. The one-time Raw and SmackDown go head-to-head. Survivor Series was set up to develop the big story between Angle and the Gang. Angle in-ring was unfortunately done. He had the mind, but his timing was super slow and he was broken. Triple H cost him his chance against Shane so he could be the one to stand front and center when they win. The best part about this thing is that Angle is gonna up the intensity. Triple H ended up saving Angle's job with the win at Survivor Series. Angle for a moment put the GM role to the side to remind the game of who he was. Jason Jordan wanted a match against Triple H and started throwing all the buzzwords to get the match. And after they booked him in a match with Braun Strowman, Jordan claimed he wasn't at 100%. He was slowly turning into a whiny, entitled person. Jordan was looking for opportunity moments, hence him wanting to face Triple H or Samoa Joe. And in storyline, he was almost too dumb for his own good. Jordan was messing up in tag team matches, always looking out for himself, but even then he became a tag team champion. He didn't want to do the hard work, and even ran out of a potential tag team match and had his guy face Finn Balor. Jordan was really hated. The fans in Brooklyn booed him like crazy. He was lazy, claiming he was injured, and the story was about to reach another level, but then Jason Jordan legitimately couldn't wrestle. This ruined the plans of a Jason Jordan story with him potentially facing Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 34. It makes a lot of sense, but the pace they were moving also makes it seem like a story for WrestleMania 35, because Jordan wasn't even a heel during all of this, and he needed more story progress to get to it. Obviously, they could all do it in one night by having him fake all these injuries and all that, but that match with the Olympic hero was definitely going to happen. Instead, WWE did something more relatable to Kurt Angle. They involved them in the story with Ronda Rousey. Rousey finally signed with WWE, and immediately, WWE reminded everyone that they wanted the woman to main event WrestleMania and that they valued women's wrestling. That did show in the last 3 years, but it went into overdrive after Ronda showed up. Originally, WWE contacted Batista for the storyline. He explained that he wanted to do it, but it would fall under his story with the game, which would lead to another match between them at WrestleMania 35. It was close to coming through, but they ended up going with Angle. Kurt Angle got into Ronda's head, saying Triple H said it was about time they owned the bitch, and Angle was forced to backtrack for his own job and claim he had pneumonia, so he misheard those words. Then Triple H in a hilarious way decked Kurt Angle, who was unbeknownst to what was about to drop on him. He was probably thinking about what he was gonna eat after the show, not a damn punch. Ronda Rousey decided to use her opponent option and choose Stephanie as her opponent for WrestleMania. Angle himself even booked the match, seeing as Stephanie had a talent's contract, and he even added himself and Triple H in a tag team match. So it was official. The team of Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle against Stephanie McMahon and Triple H. With regards to this one, it was an incredible display of what Ronda Rousey was capable of. It was loads of fun in the sense of a match where everyone understood their role, especially Triple H and Stephanie. Their job was to make Ronda look great and credible for WWE standards. She could go off script and break arms, but the WWE is an entirely different thing that not everyone could grasp. Even Ronda herself is a bit unaware of the wrestling industry despite being in it. Now, Ronda might almost be as smart as a goldfish, but this was one of her best performances in her run. Angle did work a bit in this match. He was the guy set up to make Ronda's hot tag look good, and it's a bit unfortunate that I'm about to say this, but this probably was Kurt Angle's best performance in WWE during his final days. The tag team match has a particular formula to it if you follow tradition, and it doesn't need to deviate away from that. You could obviously deviate away from that, but the method works, because you could work and go by the motions as long as you bring emotion and timing. This match is an example of that. Triple H's moment was the best in the match. He underestimates Ronda and almost pays the price. Angle brought back the Germans in intensity, which was great to see. It's also important to mention, while this was Ronda's first match, you wouldn't put it past Triple H to score the victory. So the result wasn't as open as you think it is, which makes the match very thrilling. The good guys won, and Angle resumed his role as a general manager. And it was a great debut for Ronda Rousey, one of the best debuts in WWE history. And it's all thanks to the 3 people in the match. They helped her look like $1 million. And obviously she was $1 million in the UFC, all that, but for WWE, she looked amazing. Angle resumed his role as the general manager, but Stephanie McMahon put many hurdles in his way. TNA's hiring is a great moment though. Kurt Angle ended up having an assistant by his side. Baron Corbin had wanted to make an impact on Raw, but after Kurt Angle didn't give him the opportunities, he went to Stephanie McMahon and ended up becoming the constable. And Corbin served as a thorn in Angle's side. He was a pretty boring character that wasn't interesting at all, and the whole thing was Corbin basically trying to get Angle to quit. Corbin had more of a say on things and was making sure that Stephanie's vision was realized. He was essentially the dark cloud that reigned over Kurt Angle, and it brought a lot of damage to the show as a whole because it felt gloomy, repetitive, and while the matches were good, somebody like me didn't care because the result would be the same. An interference, a DQ, or the same matches. And in some ways, Constable Corbin was the image of 2018 Raw. In between all of this, Kurt Angle looked like a nobody in front of Brock Lesnar. Brock's Brock, of course, but it's a bit crazy how things change, because WWE is portraying Angle as this weak, tired guy, and he was pretty tired in real life, but it didn't stop them from making certain people look like $1 million. The Constable was making more and more decisions without Angle's input, and eventually Stephanie McMahon sent Kurt Angle on vacation. This ended up being the beginning of the end of Kurt Angle's general manager run. Corbin took the role of general manager and Angle's time away. He booked a bunch of things, feuded with the Shield, whereas Angle had to wait a bit for his return. His return ended up being on the October 8th, 2018 episode of Raw as El Conquistador. Iconic. The Conquistador brought out the German suplexes during this battle royal and the fans went crazy. It was Kurt Angle and he stole Corbin's spot in the WWE World Cup. And if you're wondering why is Corbin even in a battle royal when he's the acting general manager, well, it's a scenario where he wanted to prove himself. Angle was one step ahead of Corbin over the next few weeks, and he was having fun as a competitor. He featured in the WWE World Cup. The only match Angle had here was with Dolph Ziggler, which was pretty interesting because Ziggler was a very skilled amateur wrestler. It wasn't a bad match at all, although it was late in Angle's career. Poor guy was working as hard as he could, but he was finished at this point. Next up was Angle's final appearance in the UK, or Europe for that matter, and it was against Drew McIntyre. McIntyre was, I believe, Angle's final opponent in TNA a few years back, but this was a much different story, seeing as Drew was now the Scottish psychopath. I think in terms of match stories, this was the best representation of this version of Drew McIntyre. He was sadistic and cold, almost insistent that Angle goes down humiliatingly. And the action itself isn't special, but it's a very good story that also unfortunately answered our question as to whether Angle was still capable or not. He had this burst of energy and adrenaline to remind everyone of what he was capable of, but this only led to Drew showing zero mercy for Angle. He hit the Angle slam and made him tap out to his ankle lock. In some ways, this was Angle's last match. It provided a sad reminder to everyone that if their favorite wrestler lives long enough inside the squared circle, they'll go out with zero dignity. It would have hurt a bit to see, but this would have been a better match for WrestleMania 35 than whatever we got. After WWE and Baron Corbin committed raiding suicide in storyline and in real life, Angle came back and finally gave Baron Corbin his comeuppance. WWE was so smart pinning this on Corbin like he's the one that insists on the same matches every week. Angle was a part of the team that squashed Corbin in a handicap match to prevent him from keeping any sort of power as the constable. And from here, his general manager run had come to a close. It was a premature ending with WWE claiming that they were going to start listening to the fans, and so they ended up dropping Paige and Kurt Angle from the roles as general manager. Angle returned to the squared circle not too long after wanting to go after Baron Corbin. They had a short match that saw the constable, or the former constable, win. And it was a story where Corbin ruined Angle's chances of remaining GM to the point where he asked to return to the ring despite his injuries. Angle was contemplating retirement, but Baron Corbin dragged him right back in, and at this point, the light was in sight. The career was coming to an end, and not too long after, Kurt Angle officially announced his final match was at WrestleMania 35. He had a retirement tour of sorts, first facing Apollo Crews. This was an average match, not much to talk about, except it was the final match for Angle in Pittsburgh. And with Angle going out, he decided to announce his final opponent for WrestleMania 35, and it was unfortunately Baron Corbin. And you could almost see the gloom and doom fall upon the crowd. At the time, the constable, Baron Corbin, was a bit questionable as Angle's final opponent, but based on the idea that WWE had for him, it's logical. But it's in an ideal world, because we all know how Corbin ended up being in WWE. So it was not just a bit, it was a big waste that people tend to forget because we had some crazy stuff going on in WWE at the time, for good and for bad, and then COVID happened, so it's like you kind of forget about the Kurt Angle last match and how important it should have been. Chad Gable got the chance to face Angle, and the Chicago crowd chanted, "This is awesome," and in some ways it was. The fact that Gable faced Angle does sound a bit absurd, but it did happen, and this match had a lot of technical wrestling. Both men are quite similar in their approach, size, and of course sporting background. Angle still had his shortcomings, but Gable himself did a great job and made Angle's offense look impactful and devastating. Angle was victorious here, but Baron Corbin tried to crash the celebration. He's yapping, and at WrestleMania, I'm gonna beat you in your final match nonsense. You guys get it. Next up was Samoa Joe. Okay, this is a bit surreal seeing as both guys brought some of TNA's greatest moments, and their last match happened in WWE. If you thought these two were gonna face off in WWE beforehand, it would have been very far-fetched. It wasn't as strong as their previous matches, but just for the image of it happening in WWE is the thing to mention about this match. Angle actually surprisingly won here, so they're trying to keep him hot for WrestleMania. The AJ Styles match on SmackDown lasted only 2 minutes before Randy Orton interfered, and that brings us to WrestleMania. A petty feud turned into an intense one, turned out to be Kurt Angle's final story of any kind in wrestling. I would have loved for him to continue in the sense of having an actual finale as opposed to this, but he was broken down and couldn't continue on another year. Can you imagine Angle exhausting himself for an extra year against the likes of The Fiend, Ricochet, King Corbin again, and Seth Rollins? I think there would have been some decent matches, and I'm almost certain he would have faced Daniel Bryan that year, the Planet's champion Daniel Bryan. But there's a reason why Angle chose WrestleMania 35 to retire. He wanted John Cena for WrestleMania 35 in a full circle moment where Cena retires him as opposed to Angle starting Cena's career in WWE. And I would have loved that. Cena didn't have anything going on at the time, although he might have been preparing for a movie, so it probably wasn't a contract. It would be fit Angle, but WWE made him seem like a mid-tier legend. Well, actually watching John Cena's retirement tour, maybe it is usual. We know they want to mess up the Triple H tour. We don't know the extent of WWE's plans for Kurt Angle's final run, but it seemed like they didn't trust him. The GM run seemed like a test run to see if he's capable of doing the full-time schedule, and Angle did want Cena. He really wanted him a lot, but Vince apparently told him to wait another year. If he waited another year to WrestleMania 36, then he could face John Cena. And to me, I don't know if that would have actually happened. It does sound logical, all that, for Kurt Angle to face John Cena, but I just don't see it happening even if Angle had remained. If anything, I imagine Kurt Angle's final match, if we're going by that time period, to be against either Daniel Bryan or Sami Zayn, if I had to guess. Unfortunately, the final match was very uneventful and dull. It came at a terrible time because the crowd was burnt out and saw plenty of matches and moments. But the match didn't offer much, and the most memorable part is the post-match with Angle wanting the crowd to chant "You suck." It's funny how life works. Angle's final match was definitely imagined differently. And it's nothing against Baron Corbin, but WWE did absolutely nothing properly to follow up the win and only got him go away heat. And that goes to show you that maybe Corbin wasn't fit for Kurt Angle's final match. This is why whenever people talk about somebody like John Cena, I don't want to imagine nothing other than an established talent facing him in his final match. Because it could be Braun Breaker, Carmelo Hayes, or any of these guys, but do we know what the future holds for them? We don't. Then Lars Sullivan destroyed him the next night and I felt some envy. It was a bit irritating at the time to see Kurt taken out by this guy who didn't offer much. It really did feel like Kurt Angle was a mid-tier legend when he was better than almost everyone they promote hard. Nobody on that roster at the time peaked like Kurt Angle did back then all around as a talent. There was not a lot of honor for this run. He featured in the Royal Rumble for a short time. His match with Rey Mysterio, one of his favorite opponents ever during the retirement tour, was scrapped and cancelled because they were too scared of putting one over the other, even though Baron Corbin beat him in that week's main event clean. The whole thing was just whatever. It felt like Angle couldn't go and they didn't want to honor him to the fullest level that they could. At the end of the day, he himself sees it as a missed opportunity. He feels like WWE didn't do enough with his retirement tour, and in some ways he himself claims that maybe it was bad because he left for TNA. And it's a bit delusional, but I do wonder if Angle would have had that same retirement tour had he actually remained with WWE in 2006, but I don't put too much thought into it. If Angle had waited another year, he probably would have been destroyed. It's just not a good case, and if he wanted to end his career at WrestleMania, which is a big event of course, this is how they were going to do it. Maybe if he did it at SummerSlam, maybe some good would have came out of it, but I just don't see it being John Cena. Alright, what do you guys think of Kurt Angle's final run? Please comment down below. That's the first video. Make sure you hit the angle lock on the like button, perhaps the angle slam on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.